Okay, good morning. Same as yesterday, but this time there'll be two sessions in the morning. Then we'll break and there'll be a longer time for lunch because people need to go out and hunt down lunch, which is difficult in this meat-eating zone. And then after lunch there'll be a discussion. So you'll see in the handout for today that we have a discussion topic, which is based on this chapter, and then we start the wisdom chapter, the 9th chapter, after that, and then Sunday morning we look at the wisdom chapter again, and again there's a discussion first thing in the afternoon, and then after that we look at the last chapter, the dedication chapter, and then that's it. There's a Samizdat weekend next weekend, which I'll ask Fabi to put on the website if people want to come, which is to cover the first 6 chapters again, rapidly. So again, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and that'll be in the small temple. Because there's no point, there should be quite a few people, but it's just some people need to catch up to do the whole text. But for those of you who have done these ones, or done 2 of these 3-day weekends, that's enough. You don't have to drop down here for that. What else was there? Yes, if you want to have a discussion, I don't know much about the process of the exam and the review, but if you want to have a discussion, we'll do that at the end of Sunday. Just what I think will happen, which may be completely different to what actually happens, but most of it is online. We have 3 afternoons on Saturdays when you can come in here and we'll be in the library and we can just review stuff. I don't quite know what we're meant to do, whether Olga sends us stuff and says do this, but that's a voluntary thing. It's not, I'm not expecting Andras to fly in from Budapest just to kind of come for an afternoon and go back, or for you to come down from Leeds for that matter, but we can see what we feel about it and how we're going with that. Okay? So let's do some recitations to make some merit, and then we'll start with the text. And again, timings will be a bit chaotic because it's my phone on airplane mode and I don't know how to make the clock be there all the time on the front. It's a smartphone but not a smart user. So, page 5. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the third destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the shackled land, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the third destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the shackled land, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the third destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the shackled land, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides, then said, I am supreme in this world. To To you who were wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, forms supremely pure, wisdom ocean, like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like a spotless moon, colour like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free like you, 3 worlds are not, incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Saviour, having great compassion, a founder, having all understanding, a field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one gone to vastness, I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, sublime pure reality, to the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community of tending virtue, I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the Great Sangha, to all 3 ever devout homage. To all worthy of respect, bowing bodies as many as all realms, atoms in all aspects, with supreme faith I pay homage. And do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform any perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the fur of thoughts, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness and death. The Heart Sutra. Thus did I hear at one time, Bhagavan was doing a mass of Lotus Mountain, here, together with a great community of monks and a great community of Bodhisattvas. At that time, Bhagavan was absorbed in concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Haya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shantideva said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Haya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son in his training who wishes to practice the activity of profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Haya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shantideva: Shariputra, any son of a lineage or daughter of a lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors of consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no eye element, and so on, up to and including no mind element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on developing the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in 3 times also manifesting completely awakened to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment, and reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, The mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of perfection wisdom is declared. Tayata gate gate bhagavate bhagavasangate bodhisattva. Shantideva, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, should train in profound perfection wisdom like that. Then Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commanded the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Ayahawalideshwara, saying, well said, son of lineage, it is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the disciples rejoice. The Bhagavan having spoken, the Venerable Shantideva, Sattva, Mahasattva, Ayahawalideshwara, those surrounding the entirety of the world of gods, humans, souls, and others, will enjoy the highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Page 13. Homage to the German Dakinis, and then the recitation of the lion-faced Dakinis mantra, and then the recitation of the Prajnaparamita mantra, and then the driving away of obstacles, followed by the praise to Manjushri. I prostrate to the gathering of Dakinis and the three chakras, who abide in the holy yoga of using space, by your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation. Look after practitioners like a mother or a child. Aka Samana. Aka Samana. Tayata gate gate bhagavate bhagavasangate bodhisattva. By the teachings of the three supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed, may they be dispelled, may they be pacified, may they be completely pacified, may all negative forces opposed to Dharma be completely pacified, may the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified, may we be separated from problems and harmful conditions of Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dhamma, and may there be auspicious and perfect happiness here right now. Obeisance to my Guru and Protector Manjushri, who rules at his heart of the scriptural text symbolic of his seeing all things as they are, whose understanding shines forth as the sun, unclouded by the fountains or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the patient love of the Father for his only Son. All creatures taught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by the suffering. You, whose dragon thunder proclamation of the Dhamma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, whose powerful sword of wisdom hews down the suffering wherever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of all ignorance. I entreat you, O Manjushri, whose princely body is adorned with 112 marks of the Buddha, who has completed the 10 changes, achieving the highest perfection of Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning. O Manjushri, all-loving one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and the text that explain them. So let's offer a mandala. Kingang lo wang ben san bi wang chen sa ji sa ji wang ben sa ge wang ji jar li go yu ge go we su bi ya bo di la sha lu ba bo lo zang bo li ne ba la che jan dang mi le dan le ba ma ya da ma ya shen ye dan dan zhou zhou dang mi ne dan dang mi ne ge da li mo che li mo wa ba sang ge xian de ju ya ba ma ma ba ye lo to ko lo ren po che lo bo ren po che song mo ren po che lo bo ren po che ram po ren po che da ju ren po che ma ba ren po che chen chen po yi po ba ye ma chen wa ma du ma ga la ma ne do ma ji pa ma na sa ma Uzola Dami, Bajo, Patsan, Sopa, Matsan, Wame, Pala, Sanjin, Yidu, Owa, Yidu, Dijin, Zawa, Dangyopa, Jebe, Pala, Lama, Dapa, Nada, Kibra, Duyan, Lama, Loza, Dogon, Doje, Chan, Jambo, Lazo, Godan, Jeba, Lama, Shingan, Bo, Doje, Doe, Dodo, Sheso, So, Shime, Ganda, So, Doa, Nange, Tana, Yambe, Sanjin, Tanje, Lato, Zewa, Goni, Jingi, Latu, Zo, Zai, Ye, Jo, Shime, To, Ta, Re, Ra, Li, Shi, Ni, De, Ya, Pa, Di, San, Ye, Shi, Du, Mi, Te, O, Wa, Yi, Zhuo, Ge, Na, Na, Ji, La, Zhe, Pa, Shuo. Da Gi Cha Da Mo So Ye Wei Yu Da Ye Ma So Lu Da No Ju Ji Pa Pa Me Pa Be Gi Le Je Li Du Su La Za De Wa Jing Ye Lo Je Su La Ma Dan Pa Ye Lam Yi Chu Ge Ka La Gen Se Chu Zing Ji Ji Da Zang Be De Je Xie Ma La Zai Ye Che Ye Jia Ba La Tu Zi Yu Dan Gu Lu La Na Ma Da La Gan De Ya Ta Ya Mi. And then refuge and bodhicitta. And at the end of this, if we just stay quietly, remembering where we are in this text. So the first 3 chapters were about generating the mind of bodhicitta, and the next 3 chapters were about protecting and taking care of that mind. And then the next 3 chapters, chapters 7, 8, 9, are about strengthening and enhancing and increasing that. So we've moved into the increasing section, so we need to generate the mind of enlightenment, otherwise there's nothing to increase, even when you're pretending rather than the real thing. But we'll spend some time just trying to generate that wish to become fully enlightened so that we can be truly beneficial for all the beings that we meet. Sangye Chodan Sugye Chonam La Janju Badu Dani Katsu Ji Dani Chune Gebe Sanangi Dana Panche Sangye Dupa Shu Sangye Chodan Sugye Chonam La Janju Badu Dani Katsu Ji Dani Chushe Gebe Sanangi Dana Panche Sangye Dupa Shu Sangye Chodan Sugye Chonam La Janju Badu Dani Katsu Ji Dagi Chushe Gibe Sanagi Dola Panche Sangye Dupa. So, in terms of the 6 perfections, chapter 8 is looking at the perfection of meditative concentration, or meditative stability, or whatever you want to call the skill that we're trying to develop. And as you can see, the text roughly goes through the 6 perfections in the order that we're normally used to. So chapter 6 was the perfection Shanti, patience, and then chapter 7 was this perfection of Virya, or enthusiasm. I just wanted to bring out a thing that English language doesn't cover the exact same range of meanings, obviously, than a Sanskrit word would or a Tibetan word. So when we talk about patience, we can talk about patience in terms of putting up with something, or we can talk about just letting things ride. But the difference here in enthusiasm, there's quite a lot about just dealing with difficulties at the same time. So, whereas sometimes in English we'd say, oh, just be patient, put up with it for a while, it'll pass. The drive to get through to the goal, no matter what's happening, that's virya, that's enthusiasm, that's the enthusiasm for virtue. Patience is also a kind of tolerance, bearing whatever is happening at the moment. There's a kind of subtle difference in range. Patience is not about putting up with bad conditions when we don't need to. I've met some people who have been interested in Buddhism who take the Shanti paramita as being something that, when you're in an abusive relationship with someone, you just stay there because you're burning off bad karma. No. It doesn't work that way. You get out. But there is that kind of putting up with stuff and driving forward, if you like. Maybe it's a spiritual drive that the enthusiasm is about. There's not, when we looked yesterday at this thing, it's very much, in the text it's translated as despondency, which is kind of all right, but really the discordant class in 7.2, what is enthusiasm? It is enthusiasm about virtue. Its discordant classes should be explained. In other words, what is opposite to it? They are laziness, adherence to what is negative, and despising oneself out of despondency. So laziness is fairly obvious. It's that mind where we put things off, or we kid ourselves that we're rejoicing while lying in bed listening to Ramzopa on the YouTube or something, and then suddenly realize that we fall asleep during the process, so we were slightly over-relaxed in that process. Adherence to what is negative is our patterns, where some of us have patterns, no matter what they are, where we just have a tendency to do that again, to do that again, to do that again. Sometimes we think because that's the right thing to do, other times we realise that it's not helpful, but we still get into that. But gradually we can change that over time through having enthusiastic drive and perseverance. But this last one, despising oneself out of despondency, covers a range of things. Low self-esteem. I can't possibly do this. We looked yesterday at these things. The idea that, oh, this is wonderful, this is super, this is marvelous, but I can't possibly do that. That's spiritual low self-esteem. Not believing in your own ability to become a fully enlightened Buddha for the benefit of all. That our Buddha nature, it's not something, Buddha nature is not given to us. It's not something that someone can give and take away, like a kind of prize or, it is our birthright in that respect, because we are a being with a mind, and because the mind works in certain ways, and because reality is what it is, then we have that ability to become Buddha if we put the work in. And so one half of this enthusiasm is about perking ourselves up and saying, get on with it. We can actually do this. This is possible. It's not an impossible task. We just have to stick at it, go for it, be there, drive on. And I think it's important, particularly in this modern culture that we have, where a lot of us somehow believe that we're not good enough, and a lot of our societal pressures and societal expectations make us feel not good enough. In terms of Buddhism, all of us right now at this very moment are perfectly well good enough to become fully enlightened. We don't need anything else. We just need to hack on and do it. Very easy, of course. But it's really important to counter that societal thing of, you lack this. You're not good enough. You lack this. You can't possibly X, Y, Z. In terms of spiritual development, in terms of becoming a Buddha, yes, we can. We can do this. It's not impossible. And it's important that we bolster ourselves in that way. As I said yesterday, I have a tendency to demotivate myself quite quickly if I'm not careful. There's an important thing of motivating. It's up to us to motivate ourselves. But also as people pretending to be bodhisattvas, trying to be bodhisattvas, it's to us to motivate others, not by haranguing them and bossing them around, but just telling people constantly, even in the worst situation you're in at the very moment, you think you're the worst person in the world. You're not. Normally it's a matter of look back. Look at the crazy person you were 5 years ago. You're not like that. You moved on. You changed. You developed. So it's really important. It's not just about being super enthusiastic and throwing yourself on the floor 100,000 times doing prostrations and gabbling prayers out. It's an attitude. It's a inner drive, which can, of course, manifest as throwing yourself on the floor 100,000 times if that's the way that you will move through the spiritual path. But that physical action is not it. It's like we have the confession to the 35 Buddhas, or the Bodhisattva, or the medicine Buddhas that happens tonight, and we recite the praise of each of the Buddhas, and then for some people they also recite that while they're prostrating, but we have to be really careful if we're doing other activities. In the sutra itself, it says the most important thing is to recite that praise. Now, maybe there is a connection between those Buddhas and us by reciting the praise, but there's also something, because this thing of praise comes up constantly throughout the Mahayana Sutras and the commentaries. I think it's also about developing a habit where we praise not just them, but each other. We praise the good in each other. We praise the good in ourselves, rather than damning with faint praise, or just remembering somebody's faults, or remembering our own faults, to recognize the beauty in the Buddhas, in the Bodhisattvas, but also recognize the beauty in ourselves as part of our training of being someone trying to get on this Mahayana path. Okay, that's my tuppence, that's gone. So, this chapter 8, is about concentration, but in a very general way. It's very different to if you studied, how to do shamatha meditation, how to do calm abiding meditation in the Lam Rim. That's a much more technical presentation of how you settle the mind and concentrate the mind. This is coming at it from a much more daily life experiential way, or something like that. It's very much about what is the main problem with our spiritual life. When we do prayers or when we do meditation, what's the main problem?
Post-meditation. Post-meditation. We don't know how to bring it into daily life.
Yeah, that's one thing. But in the meditation, if you do half an hour's meditation, how much time do you actually spend on the topic? That's our problem. We're always distracted, aren't we? We're just, last night, leading the Tara practice, I really like the fact that some of the pujas have a confession at the end where you admit all the faults that you did. But at one stage, even though I'm chanting the 21 praises, I was shopping in Tesco's in my head while the words were coming out, and then of course I jumped 2 verses, so then the other people go to the choir and look at me like this and say, oh sorry. But just a momentary lapse, you know, it's so quick, and then we're off topic again, you know. That's our problem. It's that we're just caught all the time by, you know, whatever it is, whether it's internal thoughts or it's external noise. You know, recently a friend of mine went on a silent retreat with somebody he met about a year ago, and they kind of get on quite well, and had a very difficult time because the person can't keep quiet. Just even on the silent retreat, is constantly and of course, then when you get into that mind frame, then when you come out and you come back into England, you come through London to go on to wherever you're going through, noise is a big feature here, isn't it? So you're hypersensitized to that, and it becomes too much. And it was quite funny actually, because you go on the flight back, on the train into London, on the train up north, even though in the quiet carriage, there's people bellowing into mobile phones and kids kicking off. It's just, you know, when you get hypersensitized to that, you can't help but be distracted, even if you're trying not to. So this chapter is about giving ourselves stability, that strength to stay with the object. It's the most boring topic in the world, but we will never go anywhere unless our minds become strong, you know? Because we're just drawn all the time, and it's horrifying how distracted we are, and how distractible we are, and how these things make it worse, you know? That you see advice, you know, don't take your mobile phone to bed with you. You know, don't look at the screen before you go to bed, because it triggers you to think a lot. We're becoming a hyperactive nation in a sense, and that's unhealthy, you know, because we already don't live in natural rhythms, particularly in London, you know. This time of the year, we should all be curling up and going to bed at about 4, shouldn't we, really? But that doesn't happen, you know, and work would be most cross if we did. But we're not in natural rhythms. We live in artificial light, and we, you know, when we're travelling, we have artificial light. We're on the tube, it's artificial light. We get back home, it's artificial light. It's England. You can have days when there is no sunshine for days on end. Our bodies are completely out of sync, and then we're stimulating with these things, and with computers and TV and radio and stuff like that. I always remember there was a kind of event at St Ethelburgers in that tent in the back, and first thing she did was said, right, we're all going to turn our mobile phones off and put them in the middle of the room. I know it's hard, but okay, so would somebody please read from verse 1 to verse 16, please? Any offers for verse 1 to verse 16? Do you have a text? Okay, let's tell me. There's some more text I'll print off another couple of copies of the handouts. So would someone please read verse 1 to 16? Any offers? Fickle finger of fate? Thank you so much.
Having developed joyous effort in that way, I should place my mind in meditative stabilization. The man whose mind is distracted dwells between the fangs of afflictions. Through isolation of body and mind, no distractions will occur. Therefore, I should abandon the world and completely discard conceptualizations. Because of attachment destroyed by special insight endowed with calm abiding. First of all, I should search for calm abiding. Further, this is achieved with joy by those unattached to the world. Because of the attachment one permanent being has for impermanent beings, he will not see his beloved ones for thousands of lives. Not seeing them, I will not be happy. Also, my mind will not be set in equipoise. Even if I see them, there will be no satisfaction, whereby, as before, I will be tormented by craving. Through being attached to sentient beings, I will be completely obscured from the perfect reality. My mind of disillusion will also be destroyed. In the end, I will be tormented by sorrow. By only thinking of them, this life will pass without any meaning. Friends and relatives lacking permanence will even destroy the everlasting Dharma. If I behave in the same way as those equal in fortune to the childish, I will certainly proceed to the lower ones. If I am led there to those unequal in fortune, what is the use of entrusting myself to the childish? One moment they are friends, and in a while they become enemies. Since they become angry, even at the sources of joy, it is difficult to please ordinary people. They are angry when something of benefit is said, and they also turn me away from benefit. If I do not listen to what they say, becoming angry, they will proceed to the lower ones. They are envious of superiors, competitive with equals, and proud towards inferiors. They are conceited when praised, and if anything unpleasant is said, they get angry. When is any benefit obtained from the childish? Through associating with the childish, non-virtue will certainly ensue, such as praising myself and belittling others, and discussing the joys of cyclic existence. Others and I relying upon each other in this way will bring about nothing but ruin. They will not enact my purpose, and I too will not enact their purpose. I should flee far away from childish people. When they are encountered, I should please them joyfully. I should behave well, merely ordinarily, without becoming greatly familiar. In the same way, a bee takes honey from a flower. I should take merely the purpose of Dharma, and remain unfamiliar, as though I had never seen all of them before.
Thank you very much. Okay, so some things to just clarify. In the second verse, when it says, through isolation of body and mind, no distractions will occur. Therefore, I should abandon the world and completely discard conceptualizations. It's a particular kind of conceptualization that is being described there. We have great difficulty translating this Sanskrit word prapancha. Because of course any understanding that you have from your visual field, for instance, it relies on conceptualization to some extent. Prapancha is this thing which maybe none of you have suffered from, but I suffer from a lot, where something comes, say you're meditating here, and it's quite noisy here, and you're not focused particularly on what you're doing, and then the ground judders, and you think, oh, a tube train, and then you think, oh yeah, Crossrail, oh yeah, that's opening in December, and before you know it, you've gone way over there, and that's a kind of mild distracting form, but we can also do it with, we have a moment when we have a row with somebody, and then we replay it, and we replay it, and we retell it, and maybe we tell it to some other people, and in the telling we start to get a bit of a tail going, and it becomes a thing, whether I'm a victim or whatever, and it starts to elaborate, and if we're not careful, after a while you can't really tell anymore what you embroidered in and what was actually there in the first place. That's prapancha, this thing where the mind just seems to go out of control, feeding. It's like sometimes when the mind won't shut up, when you listen to racing on the television. I mean, I've never been to a horse race, so I don't know if they send it out in the channel, but you have this man coming, I'm coming on the right, it's going on, and when you try and sit down to meditate sometimes, and the mind is just everywhere. Think. and you have to kind of let it run out of speech almost, or use techniques like, you know, the 9-point breathing meditation to kind of block it off and then settle it down. This is the conceptualizations. There's frenzied feeding type conceptualizing that we can get into quite quickly.
Is it called elaboration?
It's also translated as elaboration, yeah. But it's because conceptualization is necessary in one sense, but this one is very much often the cause of many of our deep-seated hurts and upsets or obsessions, because we end up talking to ourselves about the thing that happened. You know, rather than sort it out with Bert, I talk about it to myself for a day, 2, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, 2 years, 5 years. And then you find yourself telling somebody, you know, 10 years ago, you know, what?
It's like psychologist like Mark Williams, you know, who's also involved with mindfulness, talk about rumination. Is that part of this?
Yes, but rumination, I'm not so keen on using rumination as a negative word, you see. For me, that's you can mull things over, but yes, it's this constant playing and not going anywhere with it.
There's negative rumination as an active factor in ill health.
Yes.
Which interested me enormously, because the generation before us, you know, I was brought up on rumination at home, my parents.
Yeah.
At home, it was never seen as a fault, whereas.
Yeah, I think rumination in itself is neither negative nor positive. It depends on what you're ruminating on, if you like. What are you chewing over? Because some things, like for instance, you could say, you know, the 3 wisdoms: the wisdom of hearing or learning, and the wisdom of contemplation, and then the wisdom of meditation. The contemplation is mulling it over. You've heard this thing, you know, this weird idea that there's selflessness or emptiness, and you're thinking, what on earth does that mean? That's ruminating, you know. But it's the ruminating on things that we can't change, or we've started to elaborate, or we've actually thrown out there in the first place, that makes it, you know, the kind of negative cycle feedback that really, I'm sure, is a major part of ill health. And you know, I've noticed that as you get older, there's a tendency to worry about things, and you do have to kind of go, whoa, hang on a minute, because otherwise you can just end up worrying about everything. And some old people say, no, if I take away one of the worries, a new one is found, because the worrying is the kind of default mode almost. Yeah. Thank you. No, then there was another one that I just thought was to be sort of easy about. Yes, it's childish. It's the childish. This text is written by a Bodhisattva for monks, hopefully some of whom are Bodhisattvas. If you divide people into kind of things, there's Buddhas, and then there are Sattvas, sentient beings. So Buddhas and sentient beings. And within sentient beings, you have sentient beings who see reality to some extent, and those who don't. And the ones who don't are called children, bala, childish. So unfortunately, we are them. They are us. We are childish in Buddhist terminology. Why? Because we believe that all this stuff that's happening to me, that I'm experiencing, has essences that I can either grab and drag towards me or push away from me, when none of it does. And so, having misread my reality of experience at that level, then all my loves and hates and all the rest of it, I'm just building from then on. This is childish behavior in Buddhist terminology, so unfortunately we are them. So what this doesn't mean is saying to everybody else, well, you're childish and I'm not. It's about recognizing this quality of taking us away from the thing that matters. In this situation, in this context, the thing that matters is bodhicitta, isn't it? This whole text is about let's generate bodhicitta, let's keep it going and let's enhance it. Part of generating bodhicitta, really generating bodhicitta, is developing a strong mind, a mind that can focus and stay with bodhicitta. And so the kind of tittle-tattle of our normal lives isn't helpful for that. It's not that we give up speaking to people, but we need to recognize that, we do need to kind of mark off boundaries and say, at this time, I'm doing my spiritual development thing on a seat that I will then take out into my daily life. Successfully or not, that's a different story. But if we don't make that space, that sacred space, then the way our lives are, with the busyness and the demands and all the rest of it, and our mental tendency to be distracted, we'll end up with no space. We'll never have that gap in which to do things with. And for a lot of people, that's very uncomfortable. You have to recognize that many people, if you take them off for a 4 or 5 day retreat, day 3 or 4 is absolute purgatory for people, because they never ever were just with themselves in their head. And it's terrifying. If you go through that, it's kind of like a pain barrier, you actually find that there's a real stability and warmth that comes out after going through that barrier. But for many people, the initial thing of sitting down and being quiet is terrifying, and so when you're in front of a group of people trying to lead people through, if you can check what works for what person, it's better, because there's no point in saying to somebody who's a really busy person and who's always doing stuff, just stop it, sit, relax, because they won't. But Tibetan Buddhism is full of stuff that you can do, and then eventually you realize, actually I can still do, but I need to do it with a calm, clear awareness, and then I need to, but it has to come from inside. You can't be told, oh, you need to quieten down. It doesn't work that way. So we are all the childish, unfortunately. But then 1816, in the same way that a bee takes honey from a flower, I should take merely the purpose of Dharma, and remain unfamiliar as though I have never seen all of them before. What that's really saying is, it's coming back to this verse earlier on. Remember that thing about when you meet a sentient being, no matter who they are, no matter what they're doing, you recognize, this is the person who can lead me to enlightenment. This person allows me to practice on the path to enlightenment. That's why they're so precious, no matter what they are, whether they're pleasing or displeasing. And that's the Dharma taste to take away from that encounter. If that encounter, even if internally you boil at that moment, but you don't express, then you've achieved a lot, because you didn't add the fuel on the fire between the two of you. I have a friend who reckons that we're born into families because we have karmic debts with these people. Sometimes it seems like that, but there's a lot of this is not throwing more fuel onto the fire. If we don't chuck fuel onto the fire, things will calm down, and then we have a chance to develop a strong, stable mind. If we're kicking off and they're kicking off, then there's no hope. So it becomes back on us all the time, not to throw fuel on the fire. If we're going to calm down, I don't know if any of you have done it, but if you go away for a retreat and your mind is not in the right frame, this is a classic Western problem, isn't it? We go away for a retreat, you have to book months in advance. So you book months in advance, and then whatever happens, you then head off. And maybe it's not actually the best time, and then you're there and the mind is just bouncing and your body is bouncing and it's just really difficult, and unless you can just go, okay, this is how it is, and let it ride, then it will go okay. But if you battle it, then all manner of problems come up. Okay, thank you very much for reading out. So then, 817 through to 8:31. Please. It's quite a big chunk, but any offers? Any offers? Thank you very much.
I have many possessions as well as honour, and many people like me. Nurturing conceit in this way, I shall be made terrified after death. So, thoroughly confused mind, by the combination of whatever attachments to this and that, multiplying into thousands, suffering is a dispute and a row. Hence, the wise should not be attached. Fear is produced from attachment. Firmly understand well that it is the nature of these things to be discarded. Although I may have many possessions, be famous and well spoken of, I do not know where the collection of possessions and renown will go. If there is someone who derides me, what is there for me to be happy about in being praised? And if there is another who praises me, what is there for me to be unhappy about in being derided? If even the victor is unable to please the beings of various inclinations, then what need to mention about a negative person such as I? Therefore, I should give up worldly thought. They deride sentient beings who have no possessions and say bad things about those who do. How will they, who are by nature difficult to get along with, produce happiness? It has been said by the Tathagatas, never befriend the childish, because without their welfare, these childish ones will not be happy. When shall I come to dwell with these delights of deer, birds, and trees in the forests, but say nothing unpleasant when associated? I shall dwell in caves, in empty shrines, or at the feet of trees. When shall I not look back and be without attachment? When shall I come to dwell in places not held to as mine, which are by nature spacious, and where I may behave freely without attachment? When shall I come to live without fear, having slight things such as a begging bowl, wearing clothes not wanted by all, and not even hiding his body? Having gone to the charnel grounds, when shall I deduce that this body of mine and the skeletons of others bear the properties of disintegration? This very body of mine will also become so. Because of its odour, not even the foxes will come close to this body of mine. There will come a time when such will happen. Although this body arose as a unit, the bones and flesh with which it was born will break up and separate. What need is there to mention other friends?
Thank you. Okay, a lot of this is fairly obvious. I just wanted to reinforce, I've said before, the translation we use for attachment. In English, there are beneficial and non-beneficial forms of attachment. Beneficial form of attachment, a child needs to attach to the parents, and the parents need to attach to the child when it's born, otherwise it's not going to survive, or it's going to be damaged later on in life because not receiving just basic snuggles and care when it was tiny. That's not what is being talked about here. The attachment being talked about here is that cloying, sticky, if you think about it, it's kind of smothering, it's tight, it's gooey, it's all that kind of unable to let go, that kind of attachment. The attachment I have for my books, just get rid of your books. I can't even lend them out half the time. But if I do, I'm making very sure I make a note of who took that book. But I'm unattached to socks. I don't mind about socks. So if I look at socks, I'm unattached. If I look at books, I'm grossly attached. We all have a different range of things that we obsess on. Yeah? But we know it from the taste of it. And in terms of relationships, it's that attachment is when we have great difficulty in recognizing that the other person is not under our control, grows differently to us, is a being in their own right, rather than just a selection of our projections. And we all do it to some extent with each other, but it's worth counteracting that, particularly with people you're close to, because otherwise there comes a moment when we're just caught, and it brings pain. That's why we're encouraged not to be cloying, stuck, sticky on things or on people. The basic things, in the end we all die. And the end can be quite soon, It doesn't have to be. Yesterday I wrote a dedication book for somebody who's a friend of Jason, who's one of the board members of Land of Joy, age 32, killed himself. We've had many people here. There was a lovely guy called Chris, Polish guy, who killed himself. And from my point of view, I never expected that. Never saw that pain behind what was obviously going on. We never know. So getting stuck and glued is very difficult. But also, did you notice something else in that section? If you think of, you remember what books Rinpoche has written about the Lam Rim? Longzub Rinpoche's Lam Rim books that are gradually coming out. They're quite interesting because normally Lam. What's the initial scope of Lam Rim? Relying on the Guru, yeah. And then what's in the initial scope? What are they? It's like karma, refuge, impermanence, precious human rebirth, yeah.
Left out the
Lower realms, yeah. Lower realms, hell realms, yeah. But what else is there? What's Rinpoche written a book on that normally doesn't come to the fore when you go through those traditional teachings? Eight worldly dharmas, exactly. Did you see the thing in here? Yeah. The 8 worldly dharmas. They're very interesting, aren't they? Because you read Rinpoche's book or you hear that list. What are they? Tell me the 8 worldly dharmas. Give me some worldly dharmas.
Pleasure and pain.
Yeah.
Pleasure and loss.
Yeah.
Praise and blame.
Yeah.
And reputation, bad reputation.
Yeah. Agreed?
Yeah. There's different translations.
Yeah. So they're interesting, aren't they? Because we all suffer from them. And they really do mess up our lives, don't they? They do. That, wanting to be respected. Not necessarily to have fame, but wanting to be respected. Not wanting to be disrespected. If someone lets the door slam in your face in the shop, and so many times I catch myself, they're just partying in my head. And it's very interesting that Rinpoche, to me it's very interesting that Rinpoche, in writing these books about the Lam Rim, has really dragged out and made that a whole topic, a whole book, because a friend actually, he's in this group, Andrash, said, if you were going to do something innovative, you could make an online course or an on-site course taking those books that Rinpoche is gradually writing, people are writing from his teachings, and there would be a lot of meat with that. And when you think about it, there's already enough there for a really meaty, course. Rinpoche does love a good hell realm, There's precious human rebirth, there's Guru devotion, and there's the 8 worldly dharmas. And then also there's, Mahayana Sun for mind training, all these things. He's written lots of books, but you could make a really rich course just of those. Guru devotion, which he really pushes, is enormously difficult for us, isn't it? The whole guru thing, and constantly, particularly now, we see these, where it goes horribly wrong. And students get in the right pickle about that, but like he always does, Lama's Rinpoche, he'll always pick the sore point and go, that we should, you could have really interesting discussions just with that book alone. Precious Human Rebirth, 8 Worldly Dharmas, there's a lot of meat in those books. Yeah. But this, you can see that in here is that what are we doing? Wasting our, how can we have mental stability? How can we have kind of proper calm if I'm really concerned what they think about me? Or I'm really concerned, I think I know what they think about me. No, it's prapancha, isn't it? What we see over there as a colour and shape, and sometimes it makes a noise, what they think is a closed book. So what we think about what they think about us is like, whoa, hang on a minute, it's far too complex, stop it. But we do that a lot, don't we? We do that a lot. This prapancha, this useless conceptualizing about something that we can't know often, we don't know, or that we're just feeding our projections by doing it. We all this 8 worldly dharma. I want to be liked. We all want to be liked. I want to be disliked. I want to have enough money. How much is enough money? A month in London, how much is enough money? For all of us it will be different, won't it? I've got a dear friend who spends an awful lot of time complaining about how poor they are. And they have at least £750,000. And sometimes I'll snap and go, some of us got less. But they feel poor. That's the thing. They feel poor. It's a bit like somebody I know who, there's a wealth deity in Tibetan Buddhism, White Mahakala, and it's a six-armed and a kind of broad, smiling face, but kind of fierce in aspect and white. And a wealth deity, and they said, they really like the practice. Whenever they start to do the practice, just a big smile comes to their face. They really like that. They really like it. For some reason, just a big smile comes. Although the deity itself is quite kind of fierce looking. And then they said, but no wealth has come at all, but somehow I really enjoy things. I since doing that, I feel my life is richer in that sense. And I remember that they were telling Sean, Venerable Sean, and Sean was going, yeah, it's fine. But it is that thing, if you feel poor, you can be the richest person on earth, but feel poor. You can also not have so much money and feel rich. It's an emotional stance, it's not a, kind of interesting, these things. Okay, so that's not wasting our time, not getting into these 8 worldly dharmas, not from our inside, not worrying so much about these things, but also trying to we can engage with each other and we can have caring relationships with each other, but we don't need to have the glue, the stickiness, the tackiness, the grasping in that relationship. We can have caring, loving relationships that are light and bright and not kind of heavy and tight. So, would someone please read from 832 to 841, please? Any offers to read 832 to 841? Thank you.
At birth I was born alone, and at death too I shall die alone. If the suffering doom cannot be taken on by others, of what use are hindering friends? In the same way as those who embarked on the road own a place to stay, likewise those who embarked on the path of existence own an abode of birth. Until the time comes for it, to be supported by 4 pallbearers from that, while the world is completely stricken. Till then I shall retire to the forest. Befriending no one and begrudging no one, this body will dwell alone in solitude. If I am already counted as dead even when I die there will be no mourners. There will be no one around to harm me with their mourning. Thus there will be no one to distract me from my recollections of the Buddha and the like. Therefore I shall dwell alone, happy and contented due to insignificant difficulties. In very delightful forest, pacifying all distractions. Having given up all other thoughts, with only one thought in me, I shall strive in order to set my mind in equipoise and in order to subdue it. Both in this world and the next, desire gives me rise to great misfortune. Establishing this one killing, bondage and flame, the hells and the like in the next. For their sake many requests are made through male and female messages. Negativities and notoriety too are not shunned for their sake. You even engage in fearful deeds for them. And will even exhaust your wealth. You greatly enjoy completely embracing them.
Thank you. So let's continue. The overall rest is get away from people, don't hang out with childish, causes you problems. You need to start pulling away, go to the forest. Now if you think in the Indian cultural context, you have this idea that the majority of people should be born, learn their trade, live a family life, and then if you have a kind of religious urge at the end of your family life, once that's sorted, then you go and do religion, then you drop dead. So, for instance, that's why many people go to Varanasi or the great Tirtha places in India with the rivers, because at the end of your life you want to die near the holy site or having bathed in Ganges water, these kind of things. This view, by the time this text was written it wasn't outrageous, but when the Buddha came and his time, the idea that you didn't play the game and you stepped outside was the sannyas, the person who renounced the world, the way the world works. And then you go off into the forest precisely because it's not busy. You don't have the distractions of living in a town or a village or in a family compound at home, where there's always jobs to do. That's I think all of us know that. As soon as you get home, there are always jobs to do. If you live in a family home, there's always jobs to do because your mother or father's always telling you about jobs to do, things like that. But there's busyness all the time. So going away to somewhere it says in a foot of a tree. The idea of a foot of a tree is that apparently the Bodhi tree, this Ficus religiosa, there's a huge amount of water that the tree draws up every day. So the idea is that naturally it's kind of got energies going up like that. So if you sit at the foot of the tree, you kind of build in with this thing. In terms of your subtle body, that the energies will rise in the same way. Empty shrines that are ruins. If you look back, we have far too many people living on this island now, but in the early days when the early Christian saints would come, they often would go to empty, ruined places of previous civilizations. So there are places they've got some amenities, i.e. they've got a roof over maybe, or you can patch it up and live in it, but there's nobody there anymore. There's no kind of society going on, there's no social activity going on. So this is the key message in this part of the text. And so I'd like you to, before we have a break for the dreaded tea, I'd like you to think about that, to meditate on that for a while. these verses. At birth I was born alone, and at death I shall die alone. If the suffering doom cannot be taken on by others, whoever put that translation in isn't somebody who's an English speaker by first language, that's for sure. Nobody talks about the doom anymore. That's wonderfully normal, that is, isn't it? It's early English, that is.
It's like gloom. It's like gloom.
Doom, no, it's the kind of catastrophe of suffering. It's the doom. It's you know, that's why it's called the Doomsday Book. It's this book that catches everything. You know, the Doomsday Book caught everything. Of what use are hindering friends? Therefore I shall dwell alone, happy and contented, due to insignificant difficulties. Actually, it should be despite insignificant difficulties, shouldn't it? In very delightful forests, pacifying all distractions, having given up all other thoughts, with only this one thought in me, I shall strive in order to set my mind in equipoise and in order to subdue it. So just spend the next 10 minutes developing that wish to set my mind, strive to set my mind in equipoise, to balance my mind, to stabilize my mind, and in order to subdue it, subdue again, train. The word is used for training a horse or training an elephant, and the idea is that you have something that's wild and therefore uncontrolled, and you have something that turns out at the end that's highly controlled and highly able to do whatever it is. I mean, nowadays we have a very different view about wild animals being trained, but the idea is our mind is often described as like an elephant, a wild elephant in must, and you need to bring it under control and then use it productively rather than just let it career around destroying whatever. Yeah? So just developing that wish to set my mind in equipoise, to set my mind, to stabilize my mind, to equalize my mind, to not be up and down, here and there, but just settled, calm, peaceful, aware. Okay, so half-hour tea break, and then you'll see with the discussion this afternoon that I'm asking you to look at this whole business about going to our own internal forest, if you like, because we're not monks and nuns, we're lay people, we have jobs, we have commitments, but somehow we have to make that space, that's me time or whatever. It's a horrible phrase, but I don't like that, particularly when we're trying to do something that's not about, oh, I'll spend loads of money on me and slap some stuff on my face to make me beautiful, it's not that. But you have to mark out a barrier and say, this, like at home, I just get up at 4 and do everything, all my kind of religious stuff then. So that when Mum starts to wake up about 6:37, I'm ready for that, and I'm not kind of trying to do bits here and then go and see her, and just. But it does mean that because I'm elderly and stupid, I have to go and have a small kid in the afternoon. Okay, so half an hour tea break. Oh, that's all right. Okay. Are they okay? You got a drip for them?
No, it's prescription.
Oh, it's got a prescription. Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm going to go out and get coffee. Okay.
Would you like someone to get it for you? Would you like someone to get it for you?
No, it's good. It's good. Little walk for me. Get out. You have to remember, I live a quiet life in the countryside, so Elephant and Castle is the peak of samsara for me. It's like, wow.
Stay there. Stay. Lydia. Oh, yeah. You.
Look at this down, look at this. What's this?
It's a big Buddha, isn't it?
No, what's this bit?
This is where people sit and meditate.
Daddy, it's this. It's this. That's a link to.
Right, come on guys, back in. Next step. Big Buddha.
unless it means more just full stop, in which case, what's the time?
Oh, okay. It's near 12.
At 36.
Do you know that timetable, Mike? Is it Olga sent?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. When did you send it?
Oh,
Was it recent?
maybe 2 weeks ago. Can you not
I
find it?
didn't get it.
Didn't get it.
I didn't get it definitely because I've been checking
Okay.
junk mail and but I got it off Jane actually. I got it last week off Jane.
Okay. So that's important.
Shall I email her just to check?
You've got her thing, haven't you?
Yeah, because we got.
So if you could say, because probably what's happened is she's copied everyone down, and of course you're called Charlotte on email, and people don't know that, and they just think it can't be Mark. Yeah.
So
So-
people don't have shared.
No.
I just
No,
found
you
that.
need to move. You need to
I know
move on,
the person's got one.
or at least dress up as Charlotte once in a lifetime. You know what I mean?
No,
But that's it.
she
Say
didn't
to
get across
her,
it.
I didn't get to send, and just I am going forward. Yeah. But yeah, I hadn't noticed that. Sorry, but
Because I think it starts. I'll be still on retreat for a week. I'll have to sort of go into cooking.
that's all right. Well, you can still
Oh, we have
you can
I can
just
still go on it as well.
yeah, no, exactly. You can
Go on
still
YouTube or
you
even-
no, you just have to book in really,
Yeah.
and then start. So it's not. I don't really know what's going to happen with it, but it can't be that intensive because
No,
everyone
no.
else works. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it can't be all or nothing.
Similar to what you said before, the short one, the short review. It's similar to that.
I don't know. I know that the Lam Rim one is the one that I slightly worry about because it's like a week or something, and it's a whopping book. But hopefully people have got some sense of Lam Rim by now. You know, if you've been around Tibetan Buddhism for this lot particularly, you should have some sense of how it flows.
Or the ornaments people. The ornament.
Ornament.
Ornament, yeah.
That's a lovely book.
It's good.
No, it's good. You have to treat it not as a book, but as a kind of like a pick and mix of a dip in, dip out.
Yeah, I guess you're going to.
Yeah.
You can't memorise every bit. It's not that.
No, that's not possible. You can memorise kind of broad blocks, like so within the 11 topics of that chapter.
Yeah.
The first one is kind of one on its own, and then you have 4 that are to do with the applications, which is probably better thought of as techniques to apply. And then the next 2 are about the first 2 stages of the path, preparation and accumulation of preparation. And then the next 1 is about not falling back from various stages. And then the last 3 are so high up the path that frankly, and even in the text, it's just like cursory. Okay, so thank you for coming back. HP. Let's just spend maybe 5 or 6 minutes again reminding ourselves of where we are in the process. In other words, this text is about generating bodhicitta, and once we've generated it, protecting it, and then enhancing it. So that's first 3 chapters, next 3 chapters, next 3 chapters, and then it finishes with the dedication. So if we follow through, we're looking to calm our minds down, to stabilize our minds, to be able to focus. Why? To make our bodhicitta stronger, more intense. So if we just spend 5 or 6 minutes just trying to bring back that mind wishing to become fully enlightened for the sake of all beings, and that mind is based upon a true loving concern for all beings and a wish that all beings be free from suffering, and kind that up and try and get that feeling going. Not that I, in any case, will have any real bodhicitta, but the idea is extraordinary. So that I can buy into quite happily. It's the most beautiful idea, to really care so much for all beings that you're willing to devote your life to removing their pain and their suffering. That's, top notch as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so just some time, please generate a mind wishing to become fully enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you. So this chapter is looking at the need to calm down and the need to stabilize, because we need to, in order to make bodhicitta stronger in our minds, we need to have minds that aren't drawn everywhere all the time, unstable, wobbly. We need to start getting some stability in our minds. Of course, easier said than done, but you don't get anywhere unless you try. So it's that trying to stabilize the minds. And so part of this chapter is about encouraging us not to involve ourselves in meaningless activities in terms of the Dharma practice, in terms of our progression in the Buddhist path. Doesn't mean for lay people leaving society entirely, but what it means is getting our priorities right and giving ourselves space for our own spiritual development. For monks and nuns, it's a different thing, obviously, and it is about not living in the lay communities, but living with people who are of a similar kind to you. And also part of it is about trying to get us to see that the things that we normally, or our society tells us are, the things we should aspire to, actually ain't all that. And so there's quite a lot about cleanliness and uncleanliness and stuff like that in the chapter. So I thought we could have a little dip into that, because that's also part of the drive. So if we go to, let's say, verse 57 on page 62. And we go from verse 57 to verse 71. Would someone like to read that out? You can put your page. Don't look at me, Francesca.
Where? 61?
57 to 71. Thank you.
Having forsaken the young lotus flower, unfolded by beams of sunlight free from cloud, why, with a mind adhering to the unclean, do you take joy in a cage of filth? Since you do not desire to touch a place that is sullied by filth, then why do you desire to touch the body from which that arose? If you are not attached to what is unclean, why do you copulate with others, which arise from the field of the unclean and are produced by its seeds? You have no desire for a small dirty maggot, which has come from filth. Why do you desire the body, which is in the nature of many impurities, and is also produced from filth? Not only do you not disparage the uncleanliness of you yourself, but out of obsession for unclean bags of filth, you desire others as well. Even attractive things such as camphor, cooked rice and vegetables make the ground dirty and filthy. Should they be spat out after being put into the mouth? Although such uncleanliness is obvious, if I have doubts, then I should look at the unclean bodies that have been disposed of at the charnel grounds. Although they understand that they will generate great fear of that from which the skin is rent open, in any case, they will again generate joy towards those themselves. The scents which anointed the bodies are sandalwood and the like, not that of others. Why are you attached to others because of sense of something else? It has a naturally foul odour. Isn't it good to be unattached to it? Why do those who crave for the meaningless things of the world anoint it with pleasant scent? However, if that pleasant scent is sandalwood, how can it arise here in the body? Why am I attached to others because of sense of something else? If the naked body is in its natural state, is very frightening due to its long hair and nails, and yellowish foul-smelling heap being coated with the odour of dirt. Why do I clean it with effort, like cleaning a weapon that will cause me harm? Hence this world is completely disturbed by insanity, due to the effort of those who are confused about themselves, when my mind is despondent in the charnel grounds, through having beheld nothing but skeletons. Will there be any joy in the charnel grounds, which are cities filled with moving skeletons? In this way, the unclean is not found without paying a price. Through accomplishing their purpose, I exhaust myself and will be harmed in the hells and the like.
Thank you. So, put this in context. In Buddhism, if you suffer from or you are distracted from your meditation by being obsessed with someone else, a sexual partner or somebody who could be a sexual partner in your dreams, then this is the meditation that you do. Built into that, there's another one of that, which is if you are overly concerned about the way your body looks, the way you are, the way you dress, this is also about this. And it's really important actually, because these meditations are in context. So, you know, if you're in a relationship with someone, you do not go back home and then imagine them as a bag of filth. Because they might want to cuddle later on and you'll be going, no! But if you're in a relationship with someone and someone else turns up and they're the ultra totty of all time, then you imagine them as a bag of filth in order to cut that obsessiveness. That's the point of it. Of course, if you're a monk or nun, then you apply it to any of those images that are coming up in your visual sight. But there are, you know, there are very, if you look at the, in the next chapter, part of the wisdom chapter, there's the, looking at this practice called 4 Foundations of Mindfulness, which is the first set in a set of 37 practices. And again, they're covered in the ornament for clear realization, which we'll look at in February. That the first one is foundation of mindfulness with body. There are some problems with the English translation. What 4 foundations of mindfulness doesn't really bring out that you're taking the body as a foundation for mindfulness of something. Yeah? 4 foundations. Sometimes we end up with these neat titles, but they don't have the gap that we fill in. So, with the body, when you're using mindfulness with the body in the standard meditations, you take the body and you can do a number of things with it in terms of mindfulness. One of them is the corpse meditations. So traditionally you go to a charnel ground. Of course they don't exist in our country, we burn people or bury them, but in ancient India you just exposed people out there. And then you sit and you look at a body decomposing over 3 or 4 weeks. You go quite fast in hot climate, and your thing is constantly asking yourself, why do I see another body as attractive? Why do I see it as desirable in that sexual desire thing? Why do I want to be with those bodies? And then you can break that by watching bodies decompose and realizing that we're all like that, and that's the next thing. I'm like this, this is me. There's no difference between that body there, this one here. It's the same set of components that will go, and that helps you get away from being so concerned about how you look, and all the rest. That can be very helpful in that way. It doesn't mean that you then give up washing, because for the benefit of others, you need to try and manage down the stench, don't you? There's nothing, I'm sure everyone's had that experience of a hot summer's day on the London tube where somebody comes in and reaches and it's like, so for the benefit of others, making your armpits charmpits is a good idea. Yeah. But this, And actually to go on with that a little bit, so you can, that's one meditation with the body as a decomposing thing. Another meditation is to take it in terms of sitting in your meditation and being aware how things are changing momentarily in your body. Yeah? That's another one. Taking the body as a foundation for mindfulness of impermanence or momentariness. Yeah? And you can do many things like that. There's a standard 4, taking the body as a foundation for mindfulness of it being a product. You can also take it a foundation for mindfulness of selflessness. That within this collection there is no core, there's no